In seat 19A, she looked like any other passenger in her worn-out jeans and comfortable running shoes. Just one more person heading to the nation's capital. The hum of the engines was a familiar comfort, a sound she hadn't realized she missed. But high above the clouds, a peaceful journey was about to become a desperate fight for survival. Colonel Jessica Phoenix Reyes sat in seat 19A of American Skyways Flight 1121, wearing faded blue jeans, a simple gray t-shirt, and old running shoes. Her dark hair, streaked with silver, was tied back in a messy bun, and she clutched a battered duffel bag that had clearly traveled the world. To anyone glancing her way, she was just another woman in her late 40s, flying from Chicago to Washington, D.C. on a sunny Wednesday morning in October 2026. The flight attendant, Maria, offered her a packet of pretzels. "First visit to D.C.?" she asked, her smile genuine and warm. "Not exactly," Jessica replied with a soft voice. "I've spent some time there, but it's been a while." The college student next to her, Chloe, was buzzing with excitement for her class trip to the capital. "Are you going to see the monuments?" she asked, her eyes wide. "I might," Jessica said, a gentle smile touching her lips. "The Jefferson Memorial is lovely this time of year." What Chloe had no way of knowing was that the unassuming woman beside her had viewed the Jefferson Memorial from the cockpit of Air Force One on dozens of occasions. Jessica Phoenix Reyes had been the president's personal pilot for nearly a decade, commanding the most sophisticated aircraft in the world through some of the most fraught situations of the modern era. Her call sign, Phoenix, was a relic from her early days as a fighter pilot, earned for her uncanny ability to turn a losing dogfight into a decisive victory. But for the last 10 years, her mission had been the safety of the President of the United States, flying Air Force One to every corner of the planet. Just 3 months prior, Jessica had retired from the Air Force after 25 years of decorated service. She was finally embarking on her first real vacation as a civilian, intending to see D.C. as a tourist, not as the pilot responsible for the Commander-in-Chief's safe return. Jessica had intentionally booked a commercial flight for her trip. After decades inside the world's most secure and advanced flying machine, she craved the normal experience of travel. She purchased her own ticket, waited in the regular security line, and hauled her own bag onto the plane. "It's odd being on this side of the door," she remarked to Chloe as they awaited pushback. "I'm used to being up front." "Oh, you're a pilot?" Chloe asked, her interest piqued. "I was," Jessica said simply. "Retired now." Chloe pictured her flying for a regional airline, maybe a cargo pilot. She could never have guessed the quiet woman next to her had landed Air Force One in active war zones, navigated hostile airspace during tense international standoffs, and been entrusted with America's most sensitive aviation missions. "What kind of planes did you fly?" Chloe pressed. "Various types," Jessica answered, skillfully avoiding the details. "Mostly the big ones." As Flight 1121 ascended to its cruising altitude, Jessica began to relax, enjoying the simple pleasure of being a passenger. She had no flight plans to review, no security protocols to oversee, no responsibility for the most powerful person in the world. She could simply lean back, open her book, and watch the American heartland scroll by below. But her tranquil vacation was about to be violently interrupted. 2 hours into the flight, Captain Robert Hayes was scanning the instruments when a pattern emerged that sent a jolt of ice through his veins. A cascade of warning lights suddenly flickered to life, signaling catastrophic failures in multiple key systems. "Linda," he said to First Officer Linda Park, "we're showing hydraulic pressure loss in primary and secondary systems." First Officer Park immediately started working through the emergency checklist as Captain Hayes tried to assess the full scope of the disaster. What they found was the scenario every pilot dreads, a domino effect of system failures that was rendering the aircraft progressively uncontrollable. "Bob, we're losing control authority," Park reported, her voice tight. "The plane is becoming unstable." Captain Hayes wasted no time declaring an emergency. Chicago Center, American Skyways 1121 declaring an emergency. We have multiple system failures and are losing flight control. American Skyways 1121. Chicago Center copies your emergency. State your intentions. Chicago Center, we need immediate vectors to the nearest suitable airport. We may not be able to hold controlled flight for much longer. As the crisis deepened, the aircraft began to shudder violently, experiencing severe turbulence and control issues. Passengers grew alarmed as they felt the unnatural movements and heard the audible strain in the captain's voice over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing some technical issues," Captain Hayes announced. "Please stay in your seats with your seatbelt securely fastened while we manage the situation." But privately, Captain Hayes feared the situation was unmanageable. The aircraft was fighting his inputs with every passing second, and their options were dwindling fast. When American Skyways Flight 1121 declared a major emergency with multiple system failures, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, instantly began monitoring the event. A commercial jet with control issues over the central U.S. was a significant security threat that demanded immediate military oversight. This particular emergency, however, was happening at the worst possible moment. President Evelyn Reed was scheduled to depart from Andrews Air Force Base in 30 minutes aboard Air Force One for a vital diplomatic summit in Asia. The president's flight path would take Air Force One directly across the same airspace where Flight 1121 was in distress. "Sir," reported Major Kate Jennings to Colonel David Vance at NORAD Command, "we have a commercial emergency that could conflict with Liberty's departure." Liberty was the Secret Service code name for President Reed, and any threat to her travel demanded the immediate attention of the highest echelons of military and security command. Colonel Vance assessed the data swiftly. "What's the nature of the emergency?" "Multiple system failures, sir. Looks like a potential loss of flight control. The aircraft is unstable, and the conflict with Liberty? If the commercial jet can't maintain its heading, it could stray into Liberty's departure corridor. We might need to delay the president's launch, but President Reed's Asia trip was time-critical. A delay could have significant diplomatic repercussions impacting national security. Colonel Vance made a call that would alter the course of the day. Scramble F-22s to intercept and escort the emergency aircraft, ensure separation from Liberty's corridor, and get me a complete passenger manifest for that commercial flight, now." As F-22 Raptors from the Illinois Air National Guard screamed towards Flight 1121, analysts at NORAD scanned the passenger manifest, a standard procedure in such events. What they discovered made Colonel Vance stop cold and grab his secure line. "Sir," Major Jennings reported, "you are not going to believe who is on that plane." "What are you talking about?" "Passenger in seat 19A is listed as Jessica Reyes." "Colonel Jessica Reyes." Colonel Vance's eyes widened. Every senior officer in the Air Force knew the name Jessica Phoenix Reyes. She had been the president's pilot for nearly a decade, had flown Air Force One through more harrowing situations than any pilot alive, and was widely regarded as one of the finest aviators of her generation. "Are you positive it's her?" Vance demanded. "Confirmed, sir." Colonel Jessica Reyes, call sign Phoenix, retired 3 months ago. Last post was commander of the Presidential Airlift Group. Vance grasped the implications instantly. A commercial aircraft was in dire trouble, carrying one of the most experienced pilots on the planet, and it was threatening the president's departure. But more importantly, if anyone alive could help the crew of Flight 1121, it was Jessica Reyes. "Get me a secure channel to that aircraft's cockpit," Vance commanded, "and get the White House on the line. They need to know about this immediately." Aboard American Skyways Flight 1121, the situation was rapidly deteriorating. Captain Hayes and First Officer Park were in a desperate struggle to control the aircraft as more systems went dark. The passengers could feel the fight through the floorboards, and a palpable panic was spreading through the cabin. "We need an airport now," Hayes told Air Traffic Control. "I don't know how much longer we can keep her in the air." It was then that a new voice cut through on a secure military frequency the cockpit radio could receive. American Skyways 1121, this is NORAD Command. We understand you have Colonel Jessica Reyes on board. We need to speak with Phoenix immediately. In seat 19A, Jessica heard her call sign, and her blood ran cold. Her quiet, anonymous vacation had just ended. Somehow, the military knew she was here and was calling her by the name used for the president when she was at the controls. Chloe, the student beside her, stared at her in utter confusion. "Did they just call you Phoenix? Isn't that—" Before Chloe could finish, Captain Hayes's voice crackled over the intercom. "Colonel Reyes, this is Captain Hayes. Could you please come to the cockpit? We require your assistance." Every head on the plane swiveled to look at Jessica as she unfastened her seatbelt. The quiet tourist in faded jeans was suddenly someone else entirely. "Ma'am," the flight attendant said as Jessica moved up the aisle. "Are you really a colonel?" "I was," Jessica replied evenly. "I'm retired." But as she walked towards the cockpit door, Jessica knew retirement was a luxury she couldn't afford when 180 lives were on the line. As Jessica stepped into the cockpit of Flight 1121, she instantly grasped the gravity of the crisis. The array of warning lights, the erratic instrument readings, and the sheer physical strain on the pilots' faces told the whole story. "What systems are down?" she asked Captain Hayes, her voice a calm, authoritative presence. "Primary and secondary hydraulics are gone," Hayes responded. "We're getting intermittent flight control failures, and she's getting more unstable by the minute." Jessica scanned the instrument panel, her mind processing the data with the speed of someone who had managed emergencies at the highest possible stakes. Her time flying Air Force One, arguably the most complex aircraft ever made, had conditioned her to rapidly diagnose and react to cascading system failures. "What's your fuel situation?" she asked. "About 90 minutes at our current burn rate," First Officer Park replied. "Nearest suitable field?" "Peterson Air Force Base is about 40 miles southeast, but we aren't sure we can hold a heading that long." Jessica performed a series of swift mental calculations, weighing the aircraft's condition against weather and available runways. Her years of making life-or-death decisions for the president had honed her ability to process immense amounts of information and choose the optimal course of action under extreme pressure. "We're going to Peterson," she stated with finality. "Captain Hayes, you will remain pilot in command. I will assist by coordinating with military assets and providing technical support. Colonel, with all due respect, I've never seen failures this bad," Hayes confessed. "You don't have to," Jessica replied. "I have." "NORAD Command, this is Phoenix," Jessica transmitted over the secure channel. "I am in the cockpit of American Skyways 1121 and have assessed the situation. Phoenix, NORAD. Ma'am, we have F-22s inbound to provide escort. What support do you require?" Jessica's reply showed exactly why she had been entrusted with the president's life for a decade. "I need real-time weather for Peterson, runway conditions, and full emergency equipment on standby. Also, clear all traffic from our approach corridor and have medical teams ready for potential casualties. Roger, Phoenix. All assets are being coordinated to support you." What transpired next was without precedent in modern aviation. A commercial airliner was now being managed by the full weight of the military infrastructure normally reserved for Air Force One. Jessica was utilizing protocols and communication channels developed exclusively for presidential air travel. "Captain Hayes," Jessica said, "I'm going to talk you through an approach technique we use for high-risk landings. It's more complex than standard procedure, but it will give us better control with compromised hydraulics." Hayes listened intently as Jessica described advanced flying techniques that were normally classified, reserved for the most critical, government flights. "Colonel, how do you know all these procedures?" First Officer Park asked in awe. "Because I've used them to land Air Force One with similar failures, Jessica answered simply. Meanwhile, at Andrews Air Force Base, President Reed was being briefed on the emergency involving Flight 1121. When she was told her former pilot was on board the distressed aircraft, she made a decision that stunned her entire staff. "I want Air Force One to provide escort and support for that commercial flight," she told them. "Madam President," said Chief of Staff Mark Peterson, "that would require delaying your trip to Asia. The diplomatic fallout from abandoning Americans in peril would be far worse," President Reed cut in firmly. "Colonel Reyes flew me safely through war zones and global crises for 8 years. Now she needs our help, and we are going to give it to her." The President's order meant that Air Force One, the most secure and technologically advanced aircraft on the planet, would now function as a mobile command and control center for the rescue of a commercial jetliner. It was an unparalleled use of a presidential asset for a civilian crisis. Besides, President Reed added, if anyone can save that flight, it's Phoenix. Within minutes, Air Force One was taxiing for takeoff. Its mission changed from a diplomatic summit in Asia to the coordination of a desperate rescue over the American heartland. As Air Force One ascended towards the location of Flight 1121, President Reed opened a direct line of communication with Jessica in the cockpit of the stricken airliner. "Phoenix, this is Liberty," the President transmitted, using the informal call signs they had used during their years flying together. "Liberty, this is Phoenix," Jessica replied, a wave of relief washing over her as she recognized the President's voice. "Thank you for the assist. Phoenix, you brought me home safe more times than I can count. It's our turn to bring you home." The direct involvement of Air Force One gave Jessica access to resources no commercial flight crew had ever dreamed of. Real-time satellite weather data, advanced navigational overlays, and a direct link to military command provided her with the tools necessary to choreograph the most challenging emergency landing of her career. "American Skyways 1121, this is Air Force One," came the transmission from the presidential jet. "We are assuming command and control for your emergency approach to Peterson Air Force Base." Captain Hayes stared at Jessica, dumbfounded. "Air Force One is coordinating our landing?" "The President looks after the people who look after her," Jessica replied. As Flight 1121 started its descent toward Peterson, Jessica orchestrated the approach with the meticulous precision of a presidential flight operation. She had Air Force One providing navigational guidance, F-22 fighters monitoring atmospheric conditions ahead, and ground crews preparing for every conceivable outcome. "Peterson Tower, American Skyways 1121 Heavy, emergency inbound with Air Force One coordination," Jessica transmitted. "American Skyways 1121, Peterson Tower. We have emergency equipment standing by and have cleared all traffic from your approach. Air Force One, it is an honor to have you coordinating this operation." The approach to Peterson demanded every ounce of skill Jessica had acquired during her tenure as the President's pilot. The aircraft's control issues rendered standard procedures useless, but the advanced techniques developed for Air Force One provided the solutions. "Captain Hayes," Jessica instructed, "I need you to apply constant, steady pressure on the controls, no sudden inputs. The damaged hydraulics will respond better to smooth pressure than to quick adjustments." As they descended through 10,000 feet, the aircraft bucked and shuddered with control problems that would have overwhelmed most pilots. But Jessica's experience landing Air Force One in hostile conditions had prepared her for this exact type of crisis. "Phoenix, Air Force One," the President's voice cut in. "How's it going down there?" "Same as always, Liberty," Jessica replied coolly, "bringing everyone home safe." The final approach to Peterson was one of the most demanding Jessica had ever managed. The aircraft's instability required continuous corrections, and the margin for error was non-existent. But with Air Force One providing support and a network of military assets coordinating every variable, Jessica was able to guide Captain Hayes through a landing that would save 180 lives. "Power back slowly," Jessica instructed as they passed 500 feet. "Don't fight the plane, just guide it." "You're doing great." At 200 feet, a sudden control glitch caused the aircraft's nose to pitch up sharply. Captain Hayes started to overcorrect, but Jessica's calm voice reined him in. "Easy correction. Forward pressure. Trust the plane and trust your training. We've got this." The Boeing 757 met the runway with a harder thud than usual, but Captain Hayes kept the aircraft on the center line and under control. As they slowed, a fleet of emergency vehicles swarmed the plane, ready to assist any injured passengers. "American Skyways, 1121, excellent job," Peterson Tower transmitted. "Emergency services are on scene." In the cabin, 180 people erupted in applause and tears of relief. Many were only now realizing that the quiet tourist in 19A had just saved them all. As Flight 1121 rolled to a stop at Peterson Air Force Base, Air Force One performed a low pass overhead, a flyby of respect and acknowledgement. President Reed wanted to personally salute Jessica's incredible feat and the successful rescue. "Phoenix, this is Liberty," the president transmitted. "Outstanding job as always. You just showed the world why I trusted you with my life for 8 years." "Thank you, Liberty," Jessica replied. "Just did what had to be done." But it was far more than just what had to be done. It was something that could only have been accomplished by a person with Jessica's unique blend of skill, experience, and access to military-grade resources. Her ability to interface with Air Force One, direct military assets, and apply classified flying techniques had made a miraculous rescue possible. As passengers deplaned, many made a point to thank Jessica personally. Chloe, the college student who had sat beside her, was one of the last to leave. "I can't believe I was sitting next to the president's pilot the whole time," she said, her voice filled with awe. "Why didn't you say anything?" Jessica smiled. "Because I was just a tourist until I wasn't." Air Force One landed at Peterson shortly after the commercial jet, and President Reed was there to greet Jessica on the tarmac. "Colonel Reyes," the president said formally before breaking into a wide grin, "Phoenix, it's good to see you again." "It's good to see you too, Madame President," Jessica replied, "though I was hoping our next reunion would be under slightly better circumstances." Within hours, the story of the emergency landing became an international sensation. The tale of a retired presidential pilot saving a commercial airliner while on vacation was front-page news across the globe. "Air Force One pilot saves commercial flight," blared the headlines. "Presidential aircraft coordinates civilian rescue," wrote aviation experts who grasped the unprecedented nature of the event. But Jessica deflected the praise, insisting that Captain Hayes and First Officer Park were the true heroes for flying the crippled plane. "I just helped with coordination," she told reporters at Peterson. "Captain Hayes is the one who flew that approach and saved 180 lives." Captain Hayes, however, was quick to set the record straight. "Colonel Reyes didn't just help with coordination," he told the press. "She brought resources and techniques to that cockpit that don't exist anywhere else in aviation. Without her experience and her connection to presidential flight operations, I don't believe we would have made it down in one piece." President Reed also spoke to the media about Jessica's heroism. "Colonel Reyes served as my pilot for 8 years, and I put my life in her hands every time we flew," the president stated. Today, she proved once again why that trust was so profoundly well placed. As with all major aviation incidents, the events involving Flight 1121 were subject to a thorough investigation. The inquiry uncovered details about Jessica's actions that made her performance even more astonishing. Colonel Reyes held no current type rating for the Boeing 757, reported lead investigator Maria Sanchez. She was familiar with its systems from her general technical training, but she had been flying Air Force One exclusively for nearly a decade. And yet, she managed the emergency with the proficiency of a senior airline captain. The investigation also confirmed that Jessica's decision to use Air Force One as a command hub provided capabilities that would have been impossible for a normal commercial emergency. The advanced communication arrays, real-time satellite data, and military coordination that Colonel Reyes accessed via Air Force One gave her tools no civilian pilot has ever had during a crisis, the report concluded. Her ability to leverage these resources was absolutely critical to the successful outcome. The Federal Aviation Administration and the Air Force began a joint study of Jessica's actions to see how presidential flight protocols could be adapted for civilian aviation emergencies. Colonel Reyes's performance demonstrates that the advanced techniques developed for Air Force One have applications that extend far beyond presidential transport, said Air Force Colonel Marcus Thorne, who led the military's analysis. 2 weeks later, Jessica finally resumed her vacation in Washington, D.C. But instead of being an anonymous tourist, she was recognized everywhere she went. Her quiet retirement had been irrevocably changed by her actions aboard American Skyways Flight 1121. President Reed invited Jessica for a private visit to the White House, where they toured Air Force One together, the very aircraft they had shared on so many world-altering missions. "Do you miss it?" the president asked, as they stood together in the cockpit. "Sometimes," Jessica conceded, "but I'm grateful my experience could help save all those people." "You know," President Reed said, "if you ever get bored of retirement, Air Force One could always use a pilot with your particular skill set." Jessica smiled. "Thank you, Madame President, but I think I'll stick to retirement for now." "Though I might fly commercial a little less frequently," the president chuckled. "I can't say I blame you. Though the airlines are probably hoping you'll keep flying with them, you're the best emergency backup system they could ever ask for." 6 months after the Flight 1121 incident, Jessica was invited to speak at the Air Force Academy. Her speech focused on the importance of maintaining one's skills and sense of duty, even after leaving active service. "When I got on that plane in Chicago, I was just a tourist on vacation," she told the assembled cadets. "But you are never truly a retired pilot when people need help in the sky." She used the incident to teach broader lessons about leadership, readiness, and service. "The skills you learn as military aviators are not just for your active duty careers," she explained. "They are skills that can serve this nation and your fellow citizens for your entire lives." The cadets, all of whom dreamed of being military pilots, understood the deep significance of what Jessica had done. "Ma'am," asked Cadet Samantha Davies, "how did you know your Air Force One training would work in a commercial emergency?" "I didn't," Jessica answered honestly, "but I knew that flying is flying, and pilots help other pilots. When someone is in trouble in the air, you use every skill and every resource you have." The Air Force Academy incorporated Jessica's experience into its curriculum as a case study in leadership and crisis management, a prime example of how elite military training can serve the civilian world in times of need. 2 years later, Jessica still kept in touch with many of the people whose lives were changed by the Flight 1121 incident. Captain Hayes and First Officer Park continued to fly for American Skyways, forever marked by the day the president's former pilot saved their flight. Chloe, the college student who had sat beside Jessica, graduated and enrolled in an aerospace engineering program, inspired to dedicate her career to aviation safety. "Meeting Colonel Reyes changed the course of my life," Chloe said in a university presentation. "She taught me that aviation is about more than flying machines. It's about using your unique abilities to help people." President Reed often cited Jessica's actions as a perfect example of the dedication that defines America's service members. Colonel Reyes's heroism on that commercial flight represents the very best of our military ethos, the president said in a speech at the Academy. She proved that service to one's country does not end when the uniform comes off. It is a lifetime commitment. The incident also led to new protocols for how airlines respond to emergencies when military personnel are on board. Commercial carriers now have procedures to identify and utilize the skills of retired military pilots who may be traveling as passengers. 3 years after the incident, Jessica was the guest of honor at the dedication of a new emergency response center at Peterson Air Force Base. The facility was designed using the lessons learned from the Flight 1121 emergency, built to integrate military and civilian resources during aviation crises. This center embodies the spirit of cooperation that made our emergency landing a success, Jessica told the crowd of military and civilian aviation leaders. When civilian and military aviation work as one team, we can achieve outcomes that neither could manage alone. The ceremony was attended by many who were involved in the rescue, including the F-22 pilots who flew escort, the air traffic controllers who cleared the skies, and the emergency crews who responded on the ground. President Reed addressed the ceremony via a live video feed from Air Force One, which was en route to a summit over the Pacific. Colonel Reyes's actions 3 years ago proved that American aviation, military and civilian, is at its strongest when we work together, the president said. This facility will ensure that future emergencies are met with that same level of coordination and excellence. Today, Jessica Reyes continues to enjoy her retirement, traveling from time to time and living the quiet life she earned through her long military career. But she no longer travels in anonymity. Her name is known by aviation professionals worldwide as the pilot who saved American skyways, Flight 1121. When she flies commercially, airline crews often recognize her name on the manifest and discreetly ensure she is shown the respect owed to someone who served as the president's pilot and saved 180 souls. But Jessica remains humble about her role. "I was just in the right place at the right time with the right training," she tells anyone who asks. Any pilot would have done the same. Her colleagues know better. They understand that Jessica's performance required not just skill, but an unparalleled ability to command complex resources under unimaginable pressure, with hundreds of lives hanging in the balance. The passengers of Flight 1121 have never forgotten the quiet tourist in 19A who saved them. Many still send Jessica cards and notes of gratitude, thanking her for being a living testament to the fact that heroes often sit in the most ordinary of places, waiting for the moment they are called to do something extraordinary. Air Force One continues its mission around the globe, carrying presidents to diplomatic meetings and serving as an icon of American strength. But the crews who operate the presidential aircraft know that its most incredible mission may have been the day it became a command center for the rescue of an ordinary commercial airliner. In aviation academies and museums across the country, the story of Flight 1121 is told as a powerful example of how military and civilian aviation can unite to save lives. Young pilots study Jessica's actions not just as a feat of technical prowess, but as a demonstration of the core values that define aviation as a profession dedicated to bringing people home. And late at night, in airport lounges around the world, pilots still share the story of Phoenix, the legendary Air Force One pilot who proved that retirement never ends a pilot's duty and that the president's own aircraft will answer the call when any American needs help in the sky. She was just a tourist in seat 19A, in faded jeans with a battered duffel bag. But when 180 people needed a hero at 35,000 feet, Jessica Phoenix Reyes became exactly what she had always been, a pilot whose call sign commanded the full power of Air Force One and whose skill could bring anyone home safely. This story is a tribute to the lifelong commitment of military personnel to serve others, and to the incredible things that can happen when America's most elite aviation resources are brought together to save lives.